Welcome to the Creating a Culture of Innovation series. We have here today Ramon Baeza. Ramon is Managing Director and Senior Partner of BCG's Madrid office. He is the co-author of BCG report, Most Innovative Companies 2021, Overcoming the Innovation Readiness Gap. So Ramon, thank you very much for being with us today. I think you are in Madrid, right?
I'm in Madrid, yes. Thank you for inviting me.
My first question is that I think in your report mentioned that innovation has been always important for companies, but now has become a top priority for many CEOs. Why is that?
Well, in BCG, we also measure, which is the main drivers for shareholder value creation for companies. And what we have realized is that growth is the main driver of shareholder value creation in the long term. And which is the key innovation of growth? The key driver for growth is innovation. There is a good empirical evidence. A portfolio invested in BCG most innovative companies, 50 beats the MIC world by more than 3% in total shareholder return per year between 2005 and 2020. Then I would say that the recent surges in importance is clearly linked to the fact that many countries are slowly coming out of the COVID crisis, especially in Europe. And many forward-looking CEOs are ramping up their efforts and investments, recognizing which is the power of innovation to boost resilience and to drive advantage and growth in the new normal. And that now, this is more important than ever.
The first report was published around 15 years ago, right?
Correct.
What are the big changes between the first list and the latest publication in 2021?
I would say that we are seeing changes primarily in two aspects. The first one, it would be from a geographical point of view. There is a gradual increase in China's presence in the MIC 50 list. For instance, we had 0 companies from China in the list back in 2005. Okay. While we have 5 companies from China this year. We can say that the US has by far the largest share with 27 companies in the top 50, although we see that it has also decreased from 32 in 2005. Another angle to look at the list is that the industry mix has changed a lot. Basically, we can see nowadays that technology companies, softwares and services, tech hardware, steadily increase their presence in the list over the years. This should not come as a surprise, as we can see also that tech has become increasingly prevalent in global economy and in our daily lives. One thing in particular for this specific year is that we are seeing a jump in the presence of pharma companies, as their efforts and success in developing COVID vaccines are recognized by global innovation executives. So the executives has recognized, how fast pharma companies were able to develop the COVID vaccines.
The title of your report is how to reduce the innovation readiness gap. Can you tell us what you mean by this readiness gap?
Well, we mean that many companies need to walk the talk. So in short, we can see that many CEOs and executives are committed to invest in innovation, but their organizations are not ready to reap the success. We've seen that this is the case not only for a few companies, but for roughly 3/4 of the companies committed to innovation. This is what we call the readiness gap. Companies must not only be willing to innovate, they should be ready to achieve a return on the innovation investment, meaning a well-turned innovation system that can transform good intentions into real value. We measure this readiness for innovation system along 10 dimensions, including which is the innovation strategy, the organization, the processes, the governance, the talent and culture, and a strong portfolio and project management practices and policies.
In your report, diversity is very important for innovation. Can you define diversity? What do you mean by diversity and why it's so important?
In the context of corporations, diversity typically means the practice of including or involving people from a range of different social and ethnic backgrounds and of different genders, sexual orientation, etc. One important benefit of diversity and leadership that values diversity is that it fosters innovation. In fact, our research shows a high level that gender diversity and cultural diversity may help foster innovation. As companies in the top MIC 50 tend to have greater diversity in their leadership than the average. How does it work? According to Harvard Business Review study, diversity in corporations help cultivate 6 behaviors that are key to unlock innovation, including that everyone is heard, making it safe to propose novel ideas, giving team members decision-making authority, sharing credit for success, giving actionable feedback, and implementing this feedback from them and from the team.
You also include in your report the 5 factors for innovation. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the 5 factors are a clear ambition, clear innovation domains, performance management, project management, and talent and culture. What do we mean by a clear ambition? Top innovators pursue their objectives with clarity and consistency. They set innovation goals that align with their corporate strategy, and company leadership quantifies appropriate resources and drives the innovation agenda from the top. What do we mean by innovation domains? We have observed that the best innovators define clear opportunities for customers' benefit that the organization then aspires to own. They ground the innovation strategy in deep customer insight and focus on a limited number of innovation domains. You cannot innovate in everything. You have to choose. Performance management. What do we mean by performance management? Clearly, top innovators link their ambition to measurable KPIs that faithfully report performance on the true drivers of success. And these KPIs should be tied to appropriate incentives to reward both predictable, incremental progress and successful step change innovation. So what it's measured is done, and it's not only important the innovation input, how much you invest in innovation, but innovation output, how much you get out of this innovation, and you have to measure it. The fourth one was project management. And then what we see is that effective innovation requires multidisciplinary teams that bring external market and customer insights to shape value propositions. Mm-hmm. These teams need to be able to put companies' strategy advantage to use in new products and service development. Again, you have to have very clear in your organization which are your unique capabilities that give you, we can call, an unfair competitive advantage when you compare with your competitors. So, and you have to take advantage of that. Put the best resources and management. Then, last but not least, talent and culture. What we see is that innovation leaders foster an organization culture that grants prestige to innovation roles and values openness and thoughtful challenges to the status quo. They make efforts to attract and retain best innovation talent and assign them the most ambitious innovation challenges. Normally in corporations, talent and best resources are focused in the traditional business, that one that give already more returns. What we say is that innovation leaders, they really challenge this top talent, giving them the most important innovation challenges that we define the future of the companies.
The report is very rich in information, yeah? And there are many interesting concepts and ideas. One of them is this Innovation Flywheel. Can you tell us about it?
The Innovation Flywheel that we have is basically a way to really measure what we call the innovation to impact. So companies should be able to innovate, to have a clear, what we call innovation ecosystem, innovation strategy in which they are able to define what we call the innovation journey. So the innovation flywheel is an iterative, customer-centric, agile innovation process that is centered around the customers. And learning from every customer interaction is what we call the innovation flywheel. It often implies major changes in a company way of working, in its organizational design, its culture, and its leadership model. At the end of the day, it often amounts to significant transformation. Some CEOs, what we see is that they are willing and able to drive it as a scale change transformation program. But we have also seen others transform their organization in more organic, one flywheel at a time approach.
Now, you mentioned the CEO, and in your publication, you said that the CEO is critical in the innovation effort. How is that role materialized? What are the conditions or the quality of an innovative CEO?
Well, I would say that we already talked about the innovation flywheel and how to do it, but I would add other factors that the CEO has to lead. First of all, the business model innovation, which is very important. Secondly, the customer insight. Then the digital transformation. We've seen technology companies leading the pack, and also corporate venturing. If you want, we have already talked about the innovation flywheel, that is another factor. But in business model innovation, I would say that by definition, changes the value proposition and the operating model of the company, and hence need to be owned by the CEO and its executive team. In a first step, this can take the form of running and stress test of the current business model in the 2020s and scanning for opportunities both inside and outside the core. We believe that this is important, especially important this year. Many business models have been disrupted with the COVID crisis and need to be readapted. Business models that were valid before the COVID-19 crisis are not valid any longer. Imagine the tourism industry, imagine many industries that basically hotels, they need to reinvent their business model. And that should be dropped by the CEO. Then the customer insight. Again, what we see is that leading companies use novel customer insight and market segmentation approach, such as demand-centric growth to understand emerging or untapped customer needs. To trigger the effectiveness of customer insight, the customer insight function must have effective tools and also requires elevation to the status of a true strategic insight partner on innovation. This needs, again, the CEO to truly champion the function and elevate them in the strategic process. Before, it was more a process organization. Now we believe that knowing the customer, the new tools that are affordable in the market, allows any company both to early know which are the customer needs, which is the customer insight, and then to test concepts. Testing concepts now can be much faster than it was in the past. So giving the right importance to this customer insight is really important. Then digital transformations. What we see is that basically more and more CEOs are realizing which is the ability of digital to turbo change innovation and create this competitive advantage I was mentioning before on the top of efficiency benefits. In other words, what we see is that digital transformation and innovation transformation are both closely linked. The challenge is that, according to this research, only 30% of digital transformations are successful. One way to raise the odds of this success significantly is the organic approach of transformation I mentioned earlier. We call it the minimal viable product approach, a minimal viable organization building a minimal viable product. They start small, but they think really big. And then you need to set this one innovation flywheel with this new organization in motion, and to use the momentum of this lighthouse to multiply the flywheel we were mentioning before across the whole organization. Then corporate venturing. Innovation cannot be based only in the R&D departments of company. CEOs, need to make sure that they define a clear mandate for the corporate venture program and which are the required innovation vehicles. Secondly, they need to regularly determine a budget allocation for each of these vehicles as part of the overall innovation and R&D budget allocation. And then they need to ensure an establishment of a link to the strategic competitive advantage of the parent company.
You're talking about the problem of transformation, yeah? Traditional organizations to more dynamic, adaptive, innovative organizations. And one of the issues that is mentioned in your report is this silo mindset. How these traditional organizations with this silo mindset can break that and become more open?
First of all, a one-team mentality. Secondly, to make sure that incentives are aligned. Thirdly, communicate, clear communication. And then shift the status quo and celebrate success. Mm-hmm. What do I mean by one-team mentality? Cross-functional teams are a hallmark of many innovation leaders. I would say that one way to do this is to link strategy, product development, and sales by building a small global end-to-end cross-functional team. The team member will possess a minimum viable set of cross-functional abilities in the whole organization. Secondly, as I mentioned, incentives, align incentives. Companies, that's a classical need to match metric to address both sides of the innovation equation. So R&D and business team. Introducing shared metrics will help both the innovation function and the R&D function to collaborate more effectively. In addition to hard metrics, we believe that companies can also use soft incentives to drive cross-functional alignment. Thirdly, as I mentioned, communicate. Clear communication. That means establishing clear accountability and communication as an effective way to effectively have innovation systems. This can be done by creating a system of mirror, central, and regional teams that matches team members' role one-to-one, or share roadmap between R&D and product owners. So companies should make sure that they communicate. I would say companies that are successful in innovation, they communicate very well to their teams, to the whole organization, but also to the market. They make explicit commitments to the shareholders about which are the revenues, which is the EBITDA, which is the return that innovation is going to bring them. Then, as I said, last but not least, to shift the status quo and celebrate success. Mm-hmm. Companies, we believe, that should bring top R&D engineering teams and core business teams closer to the innovation agenda. In the past, they were working for their own. We've seen that this way of bringing them closer to innovation agenda, this empower R&D teams to craft much more novel solutions to meet the customer needs, while the R&D teams can effectively steer the projects from a technical standpoint, that is where they have the most important capabilities, taking advantage and leveraging in the company's, as I said, competitive advantage and even unfair advantage that they can have in terms of capabilities.
Very good. I think with this we covered basically all the important points in the report. But do you want to add something more or give any final advice to those organizations that want to become more innovative?
I believe that that's something that we normally do with all our clients, and we often advise them to start with a candidate assessment or where they stand right now in terms of their innovation readiness, both versus their peers, that is what traditional companies do, but also best in class. When we talk about innovation, in most of the industries, we are seeing that, you don't need only to compare with your peers, or your industry peers. You need to compare with the top innovators in the world that probably are thinking and entering your industry. To shape the shape of the readiness gap that we see usually points which are these key focus areas to make the company more innovative and to accelerate the innovation agenda, which depends a lot on the specific of the company and the market it operates in. So you have to do a focus assessment of where you are in innovation. Mm-hmm. And then, as discussed earlier, the process of innovation should be owned by the CEO. Okay. That's more and more important. And the executive team. This does not mean only seeing it in the board. And they should really have as one of the top priorities the innovation and ensure that they pay the necessary attention, that they, as I told before, give the resources, assign the resources, both in terms economic and also in people, and that they do the alignment, incentives with the strategy, and the whole organization is aligned with innovation. As I said before, innovation now is much more important than ever. I mean, as you could see from China, we are living in a world of disruption. Disruption is becoming more and more important for every single business. And this disruption is coming faster and faster. No one can live with complacency. So innovation is the way to really accelerate out of this complacency. Many companies, successful companies, what they claim is when we are doing fine, where we are succeeding, is the moment to change. Yeah. Otherwise, it will be too late. So companies should not be complacent. They should think about how to innovate and how to look at the world not only in the next planning cycle, but also, looking further and making sure to define which are my bets, where I'm going to invest, and how innovation is going to drive the future of my company. And as a final remark, what I would say is that innovation is important. Innovation really is the driver for value creation, but I would say that also it's a way to motivate your company, and it's fun. Mm-hmm. Innovating is really fun. It's something that people want to do. So I will urge companies, corporations, schools, universities to innovate, because they will have a much brighter future. They will have a much more motivated stakeholders, and they will have fun.
Yeah, I totally agree with that point. I also think that to innovate is a lot of fun. It's also a lot of risk, but probably the choice of not innovating is riskier than to try something new. Before we conclude, probably some of our viewers are interested in your report. How is possible to get access to it?
In bcg.com, you can download the most innovative companies 50 report. That's something that it's very easy to be downloaded.
Thank you very much for your time.
So thanks very much to you.